Hello, everyone. This was a good week of chapters, with all of the major quote-unquote stories having their battles heating up, outside of Mashle, but I mean it's Mashle. So, with that, we're going to start with One Piece, chapter 1027, and this was a good chapter, as the chapter is broken up pretty much into three distinct parts. Part 1 is the continued battle between Luffy and Kaido. Part 2 is Momo and Yamato discovering that Onigashima is about to collapse and break apart because Kaido's flame clouds can no longer truly keep it standing. And the third part is King versus Zoro. So each part told its varying battle and story, with Kaido and Luffy continuing to go one-on-one, showing that Luffy is about on par with Kaido at the moment, before even going into Gear 4th. So, as that fight wears on, it'll be interesting to see how Kaido adapts to it. As we know, at least to some degree, Luffy should be able to continue to go toe-to-toe with Kaido, after seeing what he was able to do with Katakuri. The discovery that Onigashima is falling apart is a big one for the story, seeing as how I've at least predicted that to happen, and it having a big influence on what's going to happen here. Now, what I didn't see coming is the fact that Yamato brought up how many weapons and explosives are on the island, so if it plummeted and dropped, it would explode and kill everyone. That I didn't actually take into consideration. However, that is an interesting wrinkle, leaving Momo the absolute must-be hero of this situation, having it that he has to now literally lift Onigashima up and save it. We'll see if he can actually pull that off, or they all have to abandon the island right before things get bad, maybe? I don't know. But now there's a lot of pressure put onto Momo to see if he can actually succeed in this endeavor. And the final part is the King versus Zoro fight, showing that King is quite a bit more formidable than we originally had thought, I think, to the most part. Because seeing both King and Queen barely struggling against Sanji and Zoro, two of the more strong characters in the crew, and seeing that they're hardly scratched or even having really any trouble is surprising, seeing how Jack was an absolute waste, but King and Queen are not. They're actually very powerful, showing that if the Topiropo had succeeded in winning the contest at the beginning of this arc, it was most likely going to be Jack that would have been killed and his spot to be taken over by one of the Topiropo, because King and Queen just don't look weak enough to be taken down by one of them. So we see the continued battle there, and Zoro is very much struggling against King, as King just plans on trying to kill him by any means necessary. Seeing that Zoro had to pull off a Smash Brothers type air jump was really funny to see, and it'll be interesting to see how far Zoro is able to harm King, because so far we've seen that King's mask is being cut up, which seemingly is angering him. So that was pretty much the chapter as a whole, as every fight in this is starting to really pick up the pace between Luffy and Kaido, which is probably going to go the remainder of this arc as it is now. King and Queen versus Sanji and Zoro, with Zoro and King getting the spotlight for this chapter. For this chapter was interesting to see how far Zoro's going to have to go to defeat King. Will be interesting because I don't think most people believed Zoro would struggle this much against a quote-unquote an underling, a Yonko commander, but still not a major quote-unquote enemy. But here he is, absolutely being kind of one-sidedly handled by King. So overall, I'd give this chapter an A. I think it was great seeing the three parts doing their thing and the various battles, as well as Zoro finally getting an opportunity to show a lot more of what he can do against a very formidable opponent. It remains to be seen if that's going to continue or not, but seeing how powerful King has been throughout the entirety of this arc, it should be a very tight fight to the very end. Also seeing if Momo can actually pull off the hero act and save everyone will be the ticking time bomb of the arc now, seeing if he can succeed or fail. I am assuming he will succeed. Now we're on to Undead Unluck Chapter 81, and this was a good chapter showing the intense battle between Billy and Andy as Fuko makes her way up towards spring. Now, the whole fight is quote-unquote gruesome, as the two are undead, so they keep going at each other very violently, from Andy gouging out Billy's eyes to then Billy doing the same, as well as causing all sorts of other huge damages, such as Billy crushing Andy to cut him in half, only for then Andy to solidify his blood to cut off Billy's arm, to continue to battle against one another continuously, and to try to one-up each other to finally win. That's the whole fight. And we learn more about Billy's sort of abilities. He is apparently able to stockpile 6 negator powers. And so far, Billy is able to deduce that he has the unstoppable ability Unbalance, which allows the buildings to keep shifting and changing. The Unmove ability, so that when he has sight, he is able to stop anything in its tracks. And Andy's Undead ability, as well as his own ability that allows him to stockpile these negator powers. He was able to figure this out by the fact that he is no longer using Juize's Unjustice to cause everyone to go against what they believe is right. And so it is finally revealed what his final ability is, which is that it's Gina's original unchange ability, that he's able to unchange the air and float, and it's also the only ability that allowed someone to catch Andy, mostly because then he is unable to do anything, chain, whatever, he can't do anything, and so it's able to capture him. As Billy is starting to encase him in this, Andy is resolved to make sure not to get caught and goes one step further in the gruesome factor and is able to somehow rip off the entirety of the front of his skin so that he can escape Billy's unchange sphere. This leaves Andy with trying to heal quickly, but man, is it an extreme measure to take to get away from this ability that can hamper him so thoroughly. So the battle is set to continue after this, and we'll see who gets the upper hand, as well as if Fuko makes it up to spring in time to end all of this. His abilities are still there in the forefront of all the fights. So that was the chapter. Overall, I think I'll give it a B. I thought it was good seeing the overall fight and the new kind of breakdown of Billy's powers. This is probably the most even battle of all of them, as everyone else is kind of at a bit of a disadvantage in one way or another. Given how this story has been, Andy is the only one who's super powered, quote unquote, and is able to kind of take everyone on toe to toe without any real problem. So Billy versus Andy will continue from here, though I don't expect to see it again next week. It'll probably move on to one of the other battles, one that we haven't seen yet. Probably either Juize or Shen's opportunity against Rip and Co, maybe. Or we'll see the continued progress of Fuko. Either or, I don't think we'll be coming back to this fight just yet, though it'll be going on in the background. Now we're on to Mashle, Magic and Muscles, Chapter 80, and this was a good chapter, showing that things are starting to heat up between the now 6 competitors on each side, though it looks like the committee isn't necessarily willing to give Easton more representatives, but they'll debate whether to allow them to even the odds, in a manner of speaking. More great Mashle comedy goes on with Marguerite and Mash, which is really funny, and we get to see some of the terrifying power that some of the Vulcans candidates are able to put forth, that even some of the stronger Easton fighters might not be quite enough to take out this entire group. We then get to see some bonding between some of the other characters, as the test is not the opening ceremony day as Mash believed, and it will be another day, maybe tomorrow, I'm not quite sure. It says right here, as the tournament will be held the day after tomorrow at a different venue. So they have a few days to kind of collect themselves with what's going on here. It now shows, with that time reprieve for the tournament, that we get to see some bonding between Abel and Abyss, Mash, Lance, and Dot all get to try to bond a little bit through playing cards, though each one is cheating in their own way because they're ridiculous. It's all very funny, and Abyss starts to lay out how powerful the Vulcans candidates are, with two in particular that are extremely powerful. The shark-toothed guy who attacked the Saint Heirs representative, I think last chapter, and Demina. We find out that the Sharktooth guy is Levis Rosecourt's, and he's the bureau chief's son, and he's a former student of Easton, so there's a lot of at least interesting stuff going on there as we get more info on that and Demina. And before the chapter ends, we see that Demina has either seriously injured or even killed Cell War after all of his failures towards Innocent Zero, and even some of what Innocent Zero's actual quote-unquote body looks like. So it'll be interesting in the long run to see how this whole thing unfolds. And there are 2 days remaining before the tournament, so I'm assuming there'll be another chapter of hijinks before the actual tournament begins, though maybe they'll just step right into it just to get it over with. Who knows? So overall, I'd give this chapter a B. It was good, and it's bonding for the card games and its wacky antics to allow some character to come through with some nice levity, as well as continuing the plot in some way with Demina's dismissal of Cell War. Adds a bit of a sinister tone to Demina as a whole, seeing as how Cell War has been one of the stronger mages we've seen thus far, and seeing him being dispatched so easily is disconcerting to a degree for our heroes when it comes to Demina and his true power, showing off a huge power display in that effort. Like I said, I'm predicting that it'll be a wacky episode next week to see some more fun antics and character development, because this is very much a comedy first, action second, and then the following week we'll see more of the tournament actually beginning and taking quite a quote-unquote serious turn, showing a lot of the non-Mashle combatants actually fighting quite a bit stronger than usual, and Mash doing Mash things, maybe fighting seriously, but you never know. So now we're on to Sakamoto Days, chapter 41, and this was a good chapter showing the continuation and conclusion to the Saw fight, where both Shin and Lo get a quote-unquote random power-up, which is actually pretty great and ridiculous, as we learn that Shin's potential for his mind reading was even more than what we already thought, and that it was Wu-Tang who explained what his next level could be, which is that it was motor readiness potential, where he's able to go further than someone's conscious thought and go into their subconscious, which allows him to bypass the few second delay that someone has in thinking of what they're going to do, as there's already an image of what someone's going to do before they think about doing it. So that's how Shin is now having the upper hand, as he's able to go past Saw's innate need to kill to get to the subconscious, and is able to take advantage of that to strike at him quite a bit faster and with more force and better timing than he had before. However, he doesn't know the full extent of this power and struggles with it, and it looks like Saw is about to take the upper hand once again before Lo gets her power up, which is that she drinks too much and is too drunk that she turns into triad mode. Yes, now she has her happy, crying, and angry drunk modes, and now triad mode, which means she's infinitely stronger and more ruthless than she's ever been before, showing that she's an actual genuine threat, not just a kid. She ends up taking the fight to Saw quite a bit more viciously than Shin did, and even plans on doing quite a bit more harm to Saw than Shin actually did, planning to cut off his fingers for every murder he's done, and even stabbing at his arm. Saw starts begging, but Lo is having none of it and still plans on killing him. We see Saw starting to run away and trying to escape because he likes to kill people and he doesn't want to die here. However, it doesn't work because Shin ambushes him and Lo and him are able to take out Saw. And that is the end of the fight, with the first of the deadly death row inmates taken care of surprisingly easily with Shin and Lo. I kind of like that there's this random power-up, just because it almost fits in this wacky world of Sakamoto Days that there would be a random power-up to help out these assassins that are larger than life. Though I imagine Saw was the weakest of them, as he doesn't have this obsessive thing outside of his need to have a bitter ending for the people he kills. He also underestimated them, I think, more than the others, and now with this defeat of Saw, I think the others are going to be quite a bit more ready for Sakamoto and co, but we'll have to see if that's true or not. So overall, I'd give that chapter a B. It was good seeing both the upped intensity of the fight as well as the end of the fight in this chapter. I can only imagine that the fights are going to get more intense from here, especially with Sakamoto probably entering the fray and not just having Lo and Shin beat up everyone, though that would be pretty entertaining in its own right. But with these power-ups, I don't see them being consistent for a little while. Maybe they will be later, and of course they won't be as strong as they were in their opening fight. But we'll see if it works or doesn't work in the end. But I thought these power-ups were rather funny and entertainingly incorporated into this chapter, allowing the two weakest members of the Sakamoto branch of fighters to at least now be able to help Sakamoto in some way, shape, or form. So now we're on to the Hunters Guild Red Hood, chapter 13, and this was a good chapter, showing the continued character development of pretty much everyone who's major so far, from Bonkers and Velo to Porchin and Grim, all trying to encourage Bonkers to become a hunter, which I think is really funny, going on to tell him that they need level-headed people as well as hot-headed people, and Grim was at the giant fight that destroyed Bonkers' town, and that she's sorry she couldn't save the whole town, also revealing that she's quite a bit older than what her initial appearance would convey. They try to take her on head-on, but know that they can't. Porchin and Bonkers get away as Velo sacrifices himself to keep Grim at bay a little bit. Grim reprimands him for this action, trying to have it that he doesn't continue to do this. Porchin and Bonkers get away, with Porchin continuously encouraging Bonkers and showing again continued character growth, which I think is rather well done in this manga so far. Like I said, it's giving me more fairy tale vibes than My Hero in terms of having so many characters and having them all be kind of in and out of important arcs, which I think is a fun way to do that. It looks like also Velo, who is caught, and some of the others were caught as well, but there's only 4 of them in there. There aren't that many that are caught so far, and the arc ends with a grand confrontation between the twins and Debonair before Bonkers and a large group of allies show up to take on and distract Debonair, as Bonkers tries to continue to recruit Telti and his sister, saying that he knows about the previous exam and he should have tried to help them and stop the whole cannibalization of their group, but he just didn't, and tries to help unshell up Telti because Bonkers was in the same boat, but Velo was able to help him out. So we'll see if Telti actually accepts this offer or not. I have a bigger inclination that the sister might. I don't remember her name, but I don't know if Telti will. I do like the growth of Bonkers, that he now has a pretty big blind faith in Velo and plans on kind of just following this whole thing, and is more or less a friend of Velo's at this point. So we'll see if the plan works out or not, or if Telti continues to ignore the whole thing. Overall, I'd give this chapter a B. It continues its great momentum, in my opinion, that this series has. And if it's lucky and can continue on this path that it's going and gets into bigger and better arcs with good villains and powerful moments and so on after this bit of a training arc here, I think this series has a lot of good potential to it, and I look forward to seeing where it goes. So that's it for the major chapters. A quick rundown of the smaller ones was Jujutsu Kaisen. We get to see the breadth of the calling game, seeing that they are now in the zone but were separated, Itadori and Fushiguro, and now they have to find their way both back to each other and to their original target. My Hero was fine, showing the continued efforts to get this grand final battle up and running, with us seeing how Stain was able to get the information that they needed, as well as how they only have a few days before the end before Shigaraki is fully melded together, not 3 months. So the final battle will be a lot sooner than everyone realized, as well as us seeing the #1 American hero, who is just female All Might. We then had the Yuzakura family, which had 2 chapters, one which advanced the plot, and the second which was just a fun nothing chapter, which I really enjoyed, with the major plot pushing forward with the father character coming in to try to stop the main character from getting information on kind of the final villain of the series. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes with next week. Then we had the Elusive Samurai, which continued its fun arc with the main character now having to confront one of the major villains, because the villain is getting more and more suspicious of him, though the way the main villain, or at least one of the major villains, treats the main character leads me to almost believe that he'll end up having a fondness for him in the end, which would be a rather entertaining twist to this whole plot development. But it was a good chapter as a whole, as it almost always is. Blue Box was good, though it feels like it's rushing a little bit, but maybe it can slow down with the revelation that its main character, I'm sorry, I just don't know everyone's names, actually ended up losing far earlier than anyone thought he would in like the first round, after him and his partner lost in doubles. The main character then lost in singles extremely quickly to one of the characters that was introduced last week. So that's a good wrinkle. Maybe it'll continue going for a while. I think its sales are going well, so maybe it'll have a pretty decent shelf life, but you never know. And Nero was great again, as we're getting a major kind of fight, battle, duel thing about to happen with the main character Nero and his roommate versus 2 kind of villainous characters. So that should be pretty interesting to see how that's handled, as it seems as though it'll be the first kind of major fight of the story, and it should set the tone for the rest of the story as a whole. So that was all of the chapters. This week was a fairly good week, with the major chapters having all of their fights intensify between One Piece, Undead Unluck, Sakamoto Days, and the Hunters Guild. They all had their battles increase in importance and intensity, with 2 of them being in the middle of their intense fighting, and 2 pretty much coming to a close. Well, yeah, because Mashle's literally came to a close and they had a bonding arc, and then Sakamoto's also came to a close, but that was just within the arc. And the Hunters Guild is leading towards the end of this battle. So it'll be interesting to see where everything goes next week. And Black Clover will be back next week, so that's always exciting to see how that battle is going to intensify. So if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, and as always, thank you for watching.